Welcome to the hidden corners where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind.
Welcome to the Wolfman Chronicles. This is Chapter 7 of Book 7, Episode 84, Nevada. Spring had finally come to circle Alaska. Well, what passed for spring anyway. Snow still clung to the roof, and the river ice cracked and moaned in the early sun. But the air was just a bit warmer. The days are just a little longer, and for the first time since the crash, Rachel smiled without forcing it. Jack stood in the living room, looking out the glass windows to the forest that seemed to go on forever. Rachel stood beside him, gazing out at the wilderness, the ground still covered in a foot or more of snow. "Well," he said finally, arms crossed against the lingering chill, "you are officially registered for school." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Yeah, just in time for spring break." She had been moping around the house, bored to death since they'd arrived. Jack chuckled at her, told her, "I have an idea. Sasha and I were talking this morning, and, well, maybe we should take advantage of your 2-week break and go somewhere. Maybe Lake Tahoe. We could rent a car and drive down to Tonopah and look for your aunt." Rachel's face shifted. Surprise, curiosity, and something else. Hope? "Really? You mean go all the way to Nevada?" Jack nodded. "If she's off the grid like I suspect, she might not be easy to track down. But Officer Grayson has been doing some digging, and he's tracked down the last address your aunt listed on her income tax returns. Although it's a long shot, she hasn't filed a return for 10 years, but before we can start the paperwork to officially become your guardians, we have to at least try to get a hold of your aunt. The agency needs to know if your aunt is okay with this, since she's officially your next of kin." Rachel jumped up and gave Jack a great big old hug. He wasn't sure if it was because she was excited to meet a real family member, or if she was just anxious to get out of the house. But either way, he was glad that she was excited. Now Jack spent the morning working out the logistics and itinerary on his laptop, with Rachel looking over his shoulder. "We can fly into Reno, we can rent a car, and drive up to Lake Tahoe. We'll rent a house there for a couple of days, have some fun while I track down your Auntie Lou. And once we locate her, we'll have us a little desert road trip. How's that sound?" Rachel snorted a laugh. "Well, except for the part about flying, I think it sounds awesome." Jack had to grin at that. He wasn't so sure he was ready to step aboard an aircraft just yet either. Miguel was still laying low while his broken ribs mended. He agreed to stay and take care of the place in their absence. The Mavka had been making a nightly appearance, slipping soundlessly into Miguel's room at night, her pale eyes glowing in the dark. He had begun to feel comfort seeing her there, watching over him, protecting him. And though the air grew cold when she entered and her presence still sent a chill through his bones, he no longer feared her. He simply lay still beside her, listening to her quiet breath in the dark, until the rhythm of her heart matched his own, and then he slept. Grizzly had moved back into his own cabin at the bottom of the property, and he asked Rosa to join him. Daily, she made the trek back up to the main house to cook for the family. Now, with just Miguel to feed, she wasn't sure what she'd do with her time. "You'll just have more time to spend with me," Grizzly chuckled. Rosa rolled her eyes. "I don't know how I'll put up with this old grumpy man for that long," but she walked over and put her arms around his thick neck, giving him a kiss on the cheek. Grizzly growled and swatted at her like a bear. "You two are like a couple of teenagers," Jack laughed. Grizzly seemed to have a new lease on life now that Rosa was a part of it. Monday morning they were on the road driving to Fairbanks. They needed to make a brief stop at the police department to let Officer Grayson know that they were leaving, pick up the temporary guardianship papers, allowing them to take Rachel out of the state legally. Grayson jotted a few notes on a piece of paper and handed them to Jack. All the information that he was able to dredge up on Rachel's aunt. Sasha looped her arm around Rachel's waist as they entered the Fairbanks airport. "Don't be scared, honey," she whispered. "Everything's going to be just fine." Rachel nodded, but her lips were pressed into a thin line. She glanced over her shoulder towards the terminal windows, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear, anticipation. It was just too soon, she thought. Too soon to be on an airplane again. She swallowed hard, desperately trying to calm her nerves. Sasha pulled her closer as they made their way through security. Jack was quietly walking ahead, his own thoughts lost in the memory of their last flight, the screaming engines, the jolt of the impact, the cold wilderness that enveloped them. Now this time the plane was bigger, sturdier, and the skies were calmer. But even so, he could feel his nerves on edge. Now the flight was smooth as silk compared to their previous experience, but both Jack and Rachel were extremely glad to be off of the plane and on solid ground once they reached Reno. It had been a long flight, broken by a 2-hour layover in Seattle, and once they were in Reno, the rush of neon lights and dry desert air hit them like an entirely different world, a far cry from the frozen stillness of Alaska. Rather than drive up the mountain in the dark, they opted for renting a hotel room in Reno and driving to Lake Tahoe in the morning. It was Sasha's call. She didn't want to risk another twist of fate in the dead of night on an unfamiliar mountain road. Well, Jack had to agree with that, grateful for the chance to decompress. I didn't realize flying could make you feel like you ran a marathon," Rachel mumbled, grateful that they had decided to get a hotel room. She was looking forward to a nice warm bed. "You did great today, Rachel," Jack smiled and tousled her hair. "And tomorrow, the fun begins." Morning sunlight spilled across the asphalt parking lot as they loaded their bags into a rented silver Subaru Forester. Rachel climbed into the back seat with her headphones loosely dangling around her neck. She'd spent her entire life in Alaska, and the idea of vacation anywhere else was exciting. As they traded the buzz of Reno for pine forests and crisp mountain air, the elevation climbed steadily. Rounding the curve near Glen Brook, the great blue shimmer of Lake Tahoe came into view, and Rachel and Sasha gazed through the windows, mesmerized by the beauty. Even Jack, who had seen more of the world than most, felt his breath hitch in his chest. The lake stretched out before them like a living gem, sunlight dancing across its surface in silvery ripples. Snow still clung to the mountain peaks, a quiet reminder that winter wasn't far behind them. But here there was a strange peace in the air, something that felt ancient, deep, and still. Rachel sat up straighter in the back seat, gazing out the window, her earphones forgotten in her lap. Her eyes were wide, taking in the impossible colors. Turquoise, shallow, bleeding into navy depths. "It's so beautiful here. Like a dream," she whispered. Jack rolled down the window and let the cold mountain air fill the car, clean and sharp. And for the first time in what felt like months, the tension in their shoulders began to ease. The first day in Lake Tahoe was soaked in golden sunlight and laughter. They checked into a cozy A-frame cabin nestled among small pines near Zephyr Cove, where the air smelled like pine needles and distant wood smoke. Sasha opened the windows to let the fresh mountain breeze sweep through the place, while Jack threw their bags on the beds with exaggerated flair and declared, "No missions, no monsters, no mysteries, Just marshmallows and memories. Rachel rolled her eyes and was already pulling on a hoodie, her eyes lighting up when she saw the small fire pit out back. Can we make s'mores tonight? Absolutely, Sasha said, her face softening into a real smile. But first, I think we all need a little lake time. Well, they rented paddle boards and spent the afternoon on the glassy blue waters, drifting lazily over sunlit shallows and laughing every time one of them lost their balance and fell in. The water was cold, but Jack, ever the show-off, tried to do a handstand on his board and toppled spectacularly, emerging with soaked hair and a grin so wide Rachel just couldn't stop laughing. That evening, wrapped in blankets under a violet sky, they roasted marshmallows and told silly stories around the fire. And for a little while, they weren't running or hiding or consumed with grief. They were just a happy family trying to carve out a moment of peace. Now on their second day, they hiked through the thick pine forest to Fallen Leaf Lake, where they picnicked on flat rocks overlooking the glassy alpine waters. Rachel skipped stones while Jack and Sasha sat shoulder to shoulder, watching her with the easy comfort of people on holiday, with no troubles in the world. By the third morning, they were reluctant to leave. Please, can we stay one more day? Rachel begged. Yeah, why not? Jack agreed. He'd tried finding more information on the location of Rachel's aunt, but so far nothing had surfaced beyond the information that Officer Grayson had found. Maybe sitting another day would be a good thing. It would give him one more day to try to reach her. They drove to Emerald Bay and hiked down to Vikingsholm Castle with a sandwich, had a picnic lunch on the porch overlooking the small island. I wish my parents were here to see this, Rachel commented. Jack put his arm around her shoulder. Gosh, they're always with you, Rachel. They always will be. As they packed the car and said goodbye to Lake Tahoe's deep blue waters, Rachel whispered from the back seat, "This was the best vacation I've ever had." Jack looked at her in the mirror and smiled. "Then we'll just have to come back." Well, they left Lake Tahoe just after sunrise, the lake still cloaked in the morning mist, quiet as a secret. Sasha drove with one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around a to-go coffee, the scent of roasted beans mingling with pine as they wound down the mountain roads. Jack had the radio on low, something twangy and country playing in the background, and Rachel leaned against the back seat window, half awake, watching the trees blur by like green ghosts. The descent from the alpine world into the Nevada desert felt like crossing into another dimension. One minute they were in cool pine forests, and the next, dry desert. The land flattened out and stretched far beyond the horizon, bathed in a pale, silvery light. Sagebrush scattered across the landscape like something forgotten by time, and they saw wild horses grazing the sparse desert grass. The road narrowed and stretched ahead of them like a ribbon of cracked asphalt laid out over the bones of forgotten land. With every passing mile, the terrain grew more desolate, more beautiful in its own harsh, unforgiving way. Rachel had her feet propped up on the back of Jack's seat, snapping photos with her camera. "It's like driving through the background of a western," she murmured, squinting out at the distant mesas. Jack leaned his elbow against the window, watching the landscape blur into streaks of gold and sage. "Yeah, well, wait till you see Death Valley. Then you'll really feel like you're in a western movie." They passed through tiny, time-warped towns with names that were easy to forget. Lunning, Mena, Coaldale, each one a scattering of rusted trailers and broken-down gas pumps, seedy brothels, and hand-painted signs clinging to life on the desert wind. Just vast skies, rocky hills, and long abandoned mining rigs half swallowed by sand. Later, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road, they entered a region of strange quiet. dust devils spinning lazily across dry lake beds, the hum of tires, the only sound for miles. Tonopah appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a scattering of low buildings, old mining gear, and one oddly grand hotel that looked out of place among the dust and the gravel. "We made it," Sasha said as they crossed into town. "This is Tonopah." "Yuck," Rachel laughed. "You'd have to be crazy to want to live in a place like this." Jack shot a glance at Sasha. He thought about what Officer Grayson had told him back at the Fairbanks police station. "Be careful. This woman sounds crazy." Perhaps Rachel was right. The next morning dawned with a pale pink haze over the desert. Jack stretched and cracked his neck, groaning as he sat up on the edge of the sagging motel bed. "Well," he muttered, rubbing his eyes, "I've slept in ditches that were more comfortable than this." Sasha, who was already dressed and brushing her hair in the small mirror over the sink, shot him a tired smile. At least ditches don't come with paper-thin walls and screaming toddlers in the room next door. Rachel emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around her head like a turban. "I think I saw a cockroach doing laps in the sink." Now they were eager to get moving. The address that Officer Grayson had scribbled down for Aunt Lou turned out to be useless. No such street existed on the town's map. After 20 minutes of driving in circles, Jack suggested that they try the sheriff's office. The Tonopah Sheriff's Office was a squat tan building nestled between a pawn shop and a bar with peeling red paint on the facade. A single patrol vehicle sat parked out front, covered in thick dust enough to write your name in. Inside, it was cool and dim with the faint scent of old paper and older coffee. A middle-aged woman with a buzz cut and a badge that read Deputy Carson looked up from behind the front desk. She studied them as they walked in, eyes sharp but not unkind. "Can I help you folks?" Jack stepped forward, pulling the slip of paper from his back pocket. "Well, we're looking for someone. A woman named Lou Ella Brennan, sometimes goes by Luna." Rachel added, "She's my aunt. We were told she might live around here." Now, at the sound of the name Luna, Deputy Carson raised a single eyebrow. Then she let out a short laugh and leaned back in her chair. "Now, there's not a soul in this town who doesn't know Looney Luna. Yeah, we know her all right." Sasha and Jack exchanged a look. "Oh, she's a right colorful character, that one," Carson said, pulling open a drawer and rifling through a stack of dog-eared address cards. "Has a trailer way out past Goldfield Ghost Town. No one else lives out there. Claims she likes the quiet. Now, folks around here mostly leave her alone." "Well, why do they call her Looney?" Rachel asked. Carson hesitated. "Well, let's say she's just a little different. She talks to the stars, swears her goats can predict the weather, that kind of thing. She found the card and scribbled something on the back. Here's a map. Now, don't rely on GPS out there. It'll just get you lost. When you get to that old mine, take the dirt road on the left. You'll see a bunch of sun-bleached bones and a pink Cadillac sticking halfway out of the ground. That's her place." Rachel's eyes lit up. "She still has the Cadillac? My mom told me about that." Carson gave her a wry smile. "She sure does. Painted moons and stars all over it last year. Said she's using it as a spiritual antenna." Jack folded the map and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Thanks, Deputy." Carson gave them a long look, then leaned in silently. "Now you be careful out there. It's easy to get turned around in the desert, and Luna, well, she lives alone for a reason." As they stepped back out into the sun, the wind kicked up fine dust along the street. Jack pulled his sunglasses on and looked out towards the empty horizon. "Well," he said, "off to meet the family. Sasha started the car, and Rachel grinned from the back seat. How crazy could she really be? And they were about to find out. They left the sheriff's office behind, following Deputy Carson's crude hand-drawn map, which felt more like a treasure hunt than directions. As they drove out of Tonopah, the buildings thinned and the highway unfurled ahead like a ribbon laid out across the sun-bleached desert. Telephone poles marched beside him in a crooked formation, and an old train car rusted into the earth sat forgotten on the horizon. They passed a rusted-out sign that once read, Goldfield Ghost Town, 3 miles. Now, as they neared the old ghost town, the road turned to gravel. Then to packed dirt rattled with ruts and potholes. They bounced along in the rental car, dust curling around them in swirls as the wheels kicked it up. Sagebrush and twisted Joshua trees dotted the land like thorny sentinels. And then, just as Deputy Carson said, they saw it. A row of sun-bleached cow skulls lined the edge of a shallow ravine like a macabre welcome sign. And just beyond, half buried in the dirt, was a pink 1959 Cadillac, nose up and pointing at the sky like it was launching into orbit. Someone had painted crescent moons and comets and swirling galaxies across its sunburned flanks. That's it, Sasha said, slow in the car. We found her. Rachel's face pressed to the window as they pulled into a clearing. A collection of trailers, patched together with mismatched doors, aluminum sheets, and vibrant tapestries, formed a loose circle around a central fire pit. Wind chimes clinked lazily from tree limbs, and solar panels leaned on crooked wooden frames like sleepy sunflowers. A goat bleated in the distance, followed by another. Then the door of the main trailer creaked open and someone peeked through the crack in the door. Who's there? Jack stepped out of the car and hollered, Luella, I'm Jack Moore from Alaska, and I need to talk to you about your sister and your brother-in-law. The woman stepped out barefoot, wrapped in a patchwork shawl with long curly hair that whipped behind her in the breeze. Her eyes were hidden behind enormous purple-tinted sunglasses, and she carried a ceramic mug the size of a soup bowl. Well, I'll be a fallen star, she said in a low, raspy voice. Is that my little Rachy Roo? You look just like your mama. Looney Luna cackled with glee and caught Rachel in a dramatic hug, nearly spilling her drink. I knew the stars were right this week. They told me someone from my bloodline would return. And look at you. You got that fire in your eyes just like your mama. Where is she anyway, and who are these people? Jack held out his hand, but Luna didn't shake it. Instead, she squinted hard behind her glasses. Your aura is very tangled. You've seen things. Walked through darkness. Her expression shifted into something oddly serious. You carry something very old inside you. Something hungry. Jack didn't flinch. He just stared back at her. I'm Jack, and this is Sasha. We need to talk to you about your sister. Luna smiled slowly. Good. I hate boring visitors. Rachel laughed nervously. This was definitely not what she was expecting. As they followed Luna towards the trailer, the goats circled in from the far hills, black and white like chess pieces. The wind picked up, rustling the bones, the flags, and the long strands of yard fluttering around the makeshift gates. Whatever this place was, it felt like they'd crossed into another world. Inside Luna's trailer, the scent of dried sage and lavender clung to every surface. The space was cluttered but cozy, filled with hanging beads and dusty books on astrology and herbal medicine and old road maps layered like peeling wallpaper. A lava lamp burbled slowly on a shelf beside a crystal ball, and a wind-up radio played soft, static-filled jazz from somewhere in the corner. Rachel curled up on a faded corduroy love seat, sipping ginger tea out of a mismatched mug with a chipped rim. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, distant. Jack and Sasha sat across from Luna at a small table covered in star charts, melted candle stubs, and several rocks that may or may not have been crystals. Luna sat silently, fingers drumming against the side of her mug as she waited for Jack to speak. "They didn't make it," Jack said quietly. "The plane went down outside of Anchorage. There were only a few survivors." His voice softened. "I'm sorry, Luna." The older woman didn't move. Her sunglasses were pushed up into her wild, curly hair now, revealing pale gray eyes that shimmered with something unreadable. Sasha cleared her throat. "Rachel's been with us since it happened. She's been incredibly strong, but she needs stability now. A home, school, a life that feels normal, or as close to normal as it can be after what she's gone through." Jack leaned in. "We'd like to be her guardians. We've talked about it. We can give her what she needs, a safe place, support, and a future." Luna's gaze flicked to Rachel. "And what do you want, Rachie?" Rachel looked up slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to stay with them, Jack and Sasha. They're like my family now. I feel safe with them." The silence that followed was thick. Luna sat back, her chair creaking under her. She reached into a nearby drawer and pulled out a half-smoked joint, lit it with a match that flared bright in the dim space, then stared out the trailer's smeared window for a long moment. She closed her eyes, and Jack and Sasha stole an uncomfortable glance. Had she fallen asleep? Jack cleared his throat, and Luna's eyes shot wide open. "What are you doing here? Who are you?" she spoke in a panicked voice. Rachel froze, her hands still wrapped tightly around her mug. Sasha sat up straighter, quietly placing her hand on Rachel's knee. "Luna," Sasha said softly, "it's Jack and Sasha. We just spoke to you a moment ago. Remember?" Luna stared at them, her expression blank. Then she blinked hard, like shaking off a fog, rubbed her temples. No, I remember. I think I just drifted off for a second. Happens sometimes." Her voice was quieter now, and uncertain. The desert does that to a person. It makes time feel slippery." Then Luna pointed to the sky, her bony finger tracing an invisible line. "You know, they've been coming by more lately." Rachel tilted her head. "Who?" "The UFOs," Luna said matter-of-factly. "I call them the sky dancers, the lights, like fish swimming through the stars. Real graceful, real fast. Sometimes they hover right above the trailer, and I swear I hear them humming." Jack leaned forward, his voice steady. "You were just telling us we could take Rachel with us, that we could be her guardians?" A flicker of recognition passed over Luna's face. "Right," she said slowly. "Did I say that? Yes, I did say that, didn't I?" Rachel gave her aunt a worried look. "Are you okay, Aunt Lou?" Luna took a long drag from that joint, then tapped the ash into an empty crystal goblet beside her star charts. "Well, my brain's been running in strange orbits these days." She tried to smile, but it wobbled. "I talk to the sky and forget what's real sometimes. But don't you go worrying about me. Oh, no. The desert takes good care of me." Sasha exhaled quietly. Jack noticed the way Rachel shrank into herself just a bit, the joy of the reunion dulled by her aunt's obvious confusion. She reached across the table and cupped Rachel's cheek with her hand. "You always have a place here, baby girl. Any time. But go with them. Let them take care of you. I'm sorry about your mama." Rachel nodded, her eyes glassy. All right, I promise. Luna smiled and sat back, her hand lingering for a second longer before dropping into her lap. Good. Just don't expect me to answer. Sasha stood and reached for Luna's hand. We'll make it official. We'll find a notary in Tonopah and get the paperwork in order. It won't take long. Luna nodded again, quieter now, her eyes slowly closing. The wind outside whistled low through the Joshua trees, and the goats shuffled along the ridge, their silhouettes lit by the gold of the afternoon sun. Inside the trailer, time felt both heavy and fragile. They didn't linger. By the time they stepped outside, Luna had already returned to her spot in the rocking chair, a blanket pulled up to her knees and a pair of binoculars resting in her lap. She didn't say goodbye. She raised her hand in a slow wave as they drove away, trailing dust behind them. Jack glanced at Rachel in the back seat. Are you okay? Rachel didn't answer for a moment, then she took a deep breath. I think so. And now I know why Mom wasn't very close with her sister. As the car rumbled over the gravel path toward the main road, the sun burned brightly across the desert hills. Wait, Rachel said suddenly, twisting in her seat. Can we have just one more minute? Jack nodded. Sasha brought the car to a halt near that pink Cadillac. Rachel stepped out and stood near the strange art installation and took a selfie with her phone. She glanced up at the sky high above the desert. A flicker of light blinked once, twice, and vanished into the stars. As they drove back to Tonopah, Jack watched Rachel in the rearview mirror. She's a resilient one, that kid. She's strong, but what's she going to think when she finds out that we're werewolves?
Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and I hope you'll come back and join us next week as we read more of the Wolfman Chronicles. Have a great week, everyone.